Here's a number that should stop you in your tracks. The company that invented the modern supermarket, the chain that once controlled a tenth of all grocery spending in America, is dead, liquidated, gone. Not because it made one bad call, but because a business running on margins thinner than a razor blade eventually punishes every single mistake. Es a watery scand. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why almost nobody in this industry gets to be sloppy and survive. Picture the store itself for a second. Full parking lot, carts rolling non-stop, doors sliding open every few seconds like a heartbeat that never stops. It looks like one of the safest bets in business. Food is the one thing people never stop buying. So why do so many grocery owners, some of them running chains for decades, quietly go broke? Start with the number that changes everything. A typical supermarket pulls in somewhere around $35.40 million a year. That sounds enormous, but grocery is a volume game, not a markup game. Net profit margins usually land between 1% and 3%. On $40 million in sales, that's maybe $600,000, $800,000 kept, if everything goes right. Spend $100 at the register and the store might pocket less than $2 of it. Everyone else in that transaction, the farmer, the distributor, the trucking company, the landlord, the utility company, the employee scanning your items, takes the rest. So forget the idea that this is about charging more for a can of soup. Nobody gets rich on a 50% markup in this business. This is a logistics operation wearing a retail costume. The entire job is moving huge amounts of perishable, breakable, low-margin product through a building faster than it spoils, faster than it walks out the door, and faster than the store across town can undercut you. Understand that, and everything else about this business starts to make sense. Now let's talk about what it actually costs to get in the door. A small corner store might run you $100,000, but that's not a real supermarket. No butcher counter, no bakery, barely any selection, and nowhere near the revenue people picture. A genuine full-format store, produce section, deli, bakery, real parking, is a few $1,000,000 minimum, and it can climb well past $10 million depending on the market. Rent alone can eat you alive before you've sold a single item. Commercial retail space often runs $20.60 per square foot a year, and a standard supermarket footprint is around 40,000 square feet. Do that math before you sign a lease. Then add construction, refrigeration systems that can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, shelving and fixtures, point-of-sale technology, a fleet of shopping carts, and, in many states, a liquor license. Depending on your location, that license alone can cost anywhere from a few $1,000s to well over $300,000, because alcohol is one of the highest margin items you will ever sell, and everyone knows it. Add it all up, and a serious supermarket is a multi-million-dollar commitment before a single customer walks through the door. That's the entry fee. Now let's talk about what it costs just to keep the lights on. Cost of goods eats roughly 2/3 to 3/4 of every sales dollar before anything else is even paid. Labor takes another 10–15%. And here's where owners consistently underestimate the bleed. Grocery has some of the worst staff turnover in the entire economy, often 40% or more a year for part-time workers. Every time someone quits, you're paying to recruit, hire, and retrain, and that cycle never really stops. Energy is another silent killer. Refrigeration runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, which makes supermarkets some of the most electricity-hungry buildings that exist. A mid-sized store can easily rack up over $200,000 a year in utility bills alone, and refrigeration plus lighting can account for most of that. Then there's shrinkage, the industry's word for inventory that simply disappears through theft, spoilage, or error. Averages sit around 1.53% of sales. That might sound small until you remember the net margin is only 1.3%. A 2% shrink rate in a business running a 1.7% profit margin isn't a rounding error. It's the difference between a profitable year and a loss. Employee theft accounts for a huge chunk of it. Shoplifting takes another large share, and fresh produce alone loses double-digit percentages to spoilage every single year. So where does the actual money get made? Not the center aisles. Canned goods, cereal, bottled drinks. Those run maybe 25–30% margin and mostly exist as loss leaders to get people in the building. The real profit lives on the perimeter. Produce runs 30–40%. Deli and prepared foods can hit 50% because customers are paying for convenience, not just ingredients. The in-store bakery is often the single most profitable department in the entire building, with margins routinely exceeding 55% because flour, sugar, and yeast are cheap, and a warm loaf smells like something worth paying a premium for. Meat and seafood land around 25–30%. And private label products, the store's own brand, routinely deliver stronger margins than national brands because you've cut the manufacturer's markup out entirely. There's also a quiet financial trick working in the background that most shoppers never think about: the cash conversion cycle. Customers pay instantly. Suppliers, especially the big manufacturers, often get paid in 30, 60, even 90 days. That gap means a well-run store is effectively financing itself on its suppliers' money every single month. And because a good store turns its entire inventory over 15–20 times a year, that tiny 1–3% margin compounds far more aggressively than it looks like on paper. Applied 18 separate times over 12 months, thin becomes powerful. None of this happens by accident. Store layout is engineered down to the inch. Most shoppers naturally drift right when they enter, so stores are built around a counterclockwise loop because it measurably increases spending per visit. Milk, eggs, and bread, the essentials, sit at the very back, forcing every customer to walk past thousands of higher-margin items just to reach what they came for. Eye level is buy level, and brands pay real money, sometimes over $1,000 per item per store, just to secure that shelf position. Lower shelves are loaded with sugary products angled at a child's eye line in the cart, not the adult pushing it. End-of-aisle displays can boost sales of a featured item by 20–30% during a promotion, and the checkout lane, where you're standing still with nothing to do, is lined with candy, gum, and cold drinks, turning a few idle minutes into pure impulse revenue. Here's the trap underneath all of it. Your costs are fixed, but your revenue is exposed to everything. Rent doesn't move month to month. Refrigeration runs whether the store is packed or empty, but demand swings with forces completely outside your control. Take online delivery. An in-store basket might net a few dollars of profit, but pack and deliver that exact same order, and labor costs can flip it into a loss. Take stockouts. When a shelf is empty, a meaningful share of customers simply walk out and buy the item somewhere else. And most stockouts aren't even the supplier's fault. They're internal. Staff not restocking fast enough. Take inflation, raise shelf prices, and price-sensitive customers trade down to private label or abandon you for a discount chain entirely. And you're doing all of this while competing against Walmart's sheer scale, Costco's membership model that quietly generates over half its profit from the card in your wallet rather than groceries at all, and hard discounters like Aldi that carry a fraction of the products with a fraction of the staff and still undercut traditional pricing by 20–30%. The lesson from history is blunt, and it's the same story I opened with. A&P wasn't some small regional chain that never understood the business. It was, for decades, the largest retailer of any kind in the United States. At its peak in the 1940s, it controlled roughly a tenth of all grocery spending in the entire country, and it literally invented the self-service supermarket format every store on Earth still uses today. Yet the same rigid systems, labor agreements, and cost structure that built that empire became a liability once discount chains and warehouse clubs reshaped the industry around it. A&P filed for bankruptcy in 2010, briefly restructured and survived, then filed again in 2015. By the end of that year, a 156-year-old company simply ceased to exist. Being good at this business once isn't enough. You have to stay good at it forever, while the ground keeps shifting underneath you. So here's the real math. If you're the one signing the lease, in a strong year, a well-run store might clear $600,000, $800,000 in profit on $35.40 million in revenue. In a rough year, a bit more shrinkage, a spoiled produce shipment, a stretch of chronic understaffing, a slice of price-sensitive customers drifting toward a discounter, that same store, with revenue barely moved, can slide into a loss of a few $100,000. This isn't a business where fortunes swing on one big decision the way they might in oil or shipping. It's won or lost in fractions of a percentage point, decided at the store level, week after week, for 52 weeks straight. It looks like a business about buying and selling. It's actually a business about margins so thin that the smallest mistake is the entire difference between profit and loss.